Welcome, everyone. We will get started in just a few minutes. I'm in the process of admitting everyone into the session. You're all coming in fast and furious. As a reminder, it will provide a better experience for everyone if you can mute your audio and video when you are not speaking. All right, the chaos is slowing. You want to give it a, oh, there's more people. I spoke too soon. All right. I'm being asked a tech question about streaming this to YouTube. And let me go ahead and see if we can sort that out, and then we can move on. All right. I'm Dr. Pamela Gay. I will be your moderator during this session. So I'll be looking at the questions in the chat, relaying them to Michael as appropriate, and helping to make sure everything goes smoothly during this session. As a reminder, it will provide a better experience for everyone if you can please mute your audio and your video when you're not presenting or asking a question. There is a overwhelmingly large number of you here, and there is good reason. I feel safe saying that Michael is probably one of the people with the most eclipse information in his brain that he can share out with all of us. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to him, and we are going to enjoy a tour of the 2023 and 2024 North American eclipses. Thank you, Michael. Take it away. You're muted, Michael.
Okay, can you hear me now? Hello?
Just fine. Sorry, I had already muted myself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. And so I'm going to share my screen. Oh, Pamela, you need to let me.
On it.
Okay.
There, you're good.
All right, I'll try again. Okay, good. So I'm going to talk with you about, I'm going to take you on a tour across North America. And we're going to visit the path of two solar eclipses coming in the next couple of years. The first, of course, is the annular solar eclipse of October 2023. And that's going to be a warm-up for the main attraction, which will be the April 2024 total solar eclipse. And so in this presentation, we're going to talk about how to get information from an eclipse map so that you can pick your very best destination for eclipse day. And also how to think if you need a backup plan, how to think about the highway system and the weather and so forth. And then we're also going to cover some other great resources with eclipse maps. There's different types of eclipse mapping being done, and I'll give you a brief introduction to what some of what my good friends are up to. Okay, so just by way of quick introduction, my name is Michael Zeiler. Together with my wife, Polly White, we operate the website greatamericaneclipse.com. The website is oriented towards providing detailed maps and information about coming solar eclipses, especially those coming to North America. Towards that end, we've just recently published two publications. The Atlas we published about 1.5 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, and that covers a span of 56 solar eclipses altogether, including partials, annulars, and total solar eclipses. We're going to be seeing some maps from the Atlas in this presentation. Another three sources we're going to be drawing on is our just published field guide to the 2023 and 2024 solar eclipses. And so we'll be walking through a lot of content from both of those. Okay, just by way of overview, the annular solar eclipse begins at sunrise in the North Pacific, reaches Oregon, crosses Nevada, the Four Corners states, and Texas, and then visits Central America and South America. You'll see that in the United States, the annular eclipse, because it's closer to the sunrise line, is going to be a morning event for us. Mid-morning in New Mexico, Texas, earlier morning along the West Coast. The total solar eclipse of 2024 begins way out in the Pacific Ocean, but interestingly, it doesn't intercept any island in the Pacific Ocean until an island which belongs to Mexico, a little ways off the coast. I forget the name of the island. The point of greatest eclipse is just inside Mexico. So around Mexico, the eclipse will be happening around noon. And in the United States, the eclipse will begin in the early afternoon in Texas, towards the later afternoon in the Canadian Maritimes. So what does an eclipse map tell you? What's an eclipse map good for? Well, one of the most interesting things about eclipse maps to me is that they're designed only for one single day. They're designed for something very ephemeral, something that has an expiration date. But historically, there's been great interest in eclipse maps. And how do we square those two? Well, we square that by understanding that the sight of a total solar eclipse is so dramatic that even in 1727, during the early settlement of Mexico, someone there produced the earliest eclipse map from the Americas. So there's all kinds of information that we can adduce from an eclipse map. And this earliest eclipse map from Mexico is actually very modern and sophisticated and communicates most of the information that modern eclipse maps do. So here's a little detail about reading eclipse maps. You'll see that the durations are marked inside the path of either total eclipse or annular eclipse. There are lines which intersect the path of totality, and these have times on them. These times are the times of greatest eclipse. Along the edges of the maps are figures of the moon with a number, in this case 0.88. This means that along this line, at maximum eclipse, 88% of the sun's disk will be occulted. And so you'll be seeing effectively 12% of normal sunshine. Okay, so this is some information about reading an eclipse map. But how do you really read an eclipse map? That's the answer. And the lesson is get to the path of totality, because that's where the action really is. So this communicates it directly and simply. Just get to the path of totality, whatever it takes. We understand that some community organizers need to organize for people who have to stay behind in the partial, and we understand that and we support that. But just for everyone else, if you possibly can, just get to the path. Okay, now I'm going to show you several other great resources for eclipse map and eclipse forecasting information. So let's see. All right, so of these websites, the first one I want to show you, and Rick showed this earlier in the plenary, is eclipse.was.org. I won't repeat his explanation of the website, but I agree that it has two vital functions. One is a portal to reliable sources. Secondly, as the authoritative source of eye safety information. And that's just spot on. So thank you to the AAS for this resource. Another resource you may have heard of is by our friend Fred Espenak. Fred is the Dean of Eclipse Mappers and the Dean of Eclipse Computations. He's made it his life's work to provide the absolute authoritative information about eclipses, not only in the coming years, but in the coming millennia. And you could spend hours on Fred's website. Let's look at some contemporary eclipses on his website. So you can scroll down and find an eclipse of interest and click on it for more information. Fred and I just recently finished a project where we created GIFs of the eclipse. And let's see, let's try that. Let's see if, okay, so this is an animated GIF that Fred Espenak and I worked on, and these are available through both of our websites. Did you know that in the 21st century, there are 224 solar eclipses, and we make GIFs for every single one of them? Well, these GIFs are actually quite instructive. You know how eclipse paths, when you look on them on a global map, they have these curious boomerang shapes to them. If you really take a close look at these GIFs, or if you laid a straight edge on the screen, you would see that the inner shadow, the black dot of totality, is actually moving along a straight line. It's the tilting of the Earth's axis, which is creating these effects that results in a curved eclipse path. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, so moving along to other resources. This is Fred's Eclipse Wise. Okay, another resource that's pretty vital is Eclipsophile, and this is by Jay Anderson and Jennifer West. And these are meteorologists who look at all of the available data and give their best prognostication on where the most favorable places to go for an eclipse are. And there's a lot of detail and nuance in this analysis. For example, I was reading a section that while the US Midwest, and especially the Great Lakes area, doesn't have prime weather odds for that time, there are some microclimate things that can happen with lakes that could actually be quite favorable on eclipse days. So if you're not familiar with this website, Eclipsophile, put this on one of your top reads. This is essential reading for eclipse chasers. Okay, moving along is Dan McGlown's website, eclipse2024.org. Dan is doing a lot of great works on eclipse education and organizing communities for the eclipse. And one noteworthy project that he has on his website is an eclipse simulator. So essentially, you can select a place inside the eclipse and open the simulator for it. And I will make this go quickly, but you can see how I'm scrolling through the time. And this is now getting dark, totality, and then partial eclipse again. So he's done a great job with these types of simulators, and these are recommended. Another essential resource are the interactive eclipse maps by Xavier Joubier of Paris, France. And to get to them, you go to xjubier.free.fr and navigate through the menu system, select an eclipse of interest, and it's based on Google Maps. So you can just go in, zoom in, and get detailed information about eclipse circumstances anywhere in the path. Exact durations, exact times, every detail that you can imagine is reported through this app. So this is very useful. And also, I work closely with Xavier on the maps that I produce. That the core computations for the maps that I produced are produced by Xavier's Solar Eclipse calculator app. So I thank Xavier for that. And then here's the last website. I'll just quickly show you. This is our website, greateramericaneclipse.com. And we've got a lot of information, a lot of maps, just a lot of content about the eclipses. Okay, so I'm going to move back to PowerPoint. Okay, so introducing the two eclipses crossing the US. These are all the cities and towns within the path of the annular eclipse and the total solar eclipse. A couple of interesting facts. The annular eclipse doesn't pass over very many sizable cities. The only really sizable cities it passes over are Albuquerque, San Antonio, and Corpus Christi. And there is a total, I did this calculation recently, there is a total of 6.7 million people that reside within the path of the annular solar eclipse. For the total solar eclipse, it's a different story because you can see there's all kinds of major cities inside the path. There's Mazatlan, Torreon, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, Indianapolis, Cleveland, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Burlington, Montreal, all inside the path. And all of these areas add up to a population actually within the United States, because I haven't processed the Canada and Mexico data yet, but within the United States, the population inside the path of the total eclipse is 31.6 million people. So those are the numbers. Okay, so here's a couple of specialized maps that I made that are kind of fun. National parks are always fun points of interest for any viewing event in the sky. It's because you're in a beautiful location, you're inspired by the natural setting, and you see something really remarkable in the sky. And oftentimes the features in these national parks can be very photogenic. So the camera hounds are in full force trying to frame the perfect photograph for the eclipse. What's really remarkable about the annular eclipse is see how it cuts through the four corners and goes over a couple of dozen national park units just in that concentrated area. So there's a lot of scenery to enjoy right there. The total solar eclipse has some national parks, but not quite like the annular eclipse in the Four Corners area. Here's another quick map on planetariums within the paths. Now, of course, it would be a really bad idea to be inside the planetarium during an eclipse, but you can be sure that the majority of these planetariums will have outdoor viewing events in conjunction with the eclipse. Texas is going to garner a tremendous amount of interest during the eclipse, basically for three reasons. The first reason, as you can see on the map, is that the two eclipses crisscross the state, and so that's going to form a strong focal point. But look what else is happening in Texas. Nearly all of the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan area, much of Austin and San Antonio are inside the path. So just within Texas, there's huge population that will be suddenly witness to a total solar eclipse in the sky. So that'll be exciting. And then the third reason why Texas will be special during the eclipse is, at least within the United States, it has the best odds of good weather on eclipse day. So that's Texas in a nutshell for you. It's going to be eclipse central. Okay, now we're starting a section on the annular eclipse. This is an introductory map from our field guide. And here is our print map that you can find on our website of the 2023 eclipse. It's a nice perspective of how the shadow slides across. As I mentioned earlier, this eclipse in the US will be a morning event. And notice how the shadow ovals are quite elongated at Oregon and much more compact down by Texas. That's because it's rising up the curve. The shadow is going up the curve of the Earth to more of a local noon position. Okay, so here's an animated GIF that shows exactly the track of the annular eclipse. It's got a fairly wide path. After it crosses Central America and Brazil, it ends at sunset just off the coast of Brazil. Okay, here's a couple of maps that I just completed, and that will be available on the website soon. This map, as shown on the left, covers the western states inside the path of the annular eclipse. And what you see on the right is a detailed view of this map here. So you can see what kind of content in there. The interesting places, I think, in Oregon for an eclipse chaser is first, naturally, the Oregon Dunes Natural Recreation Area. This is a scenic location that is right on the right where the eclipse is longest in duration, about 4 minutes and 30 seconds. So that's obviously a prime spot to go if the weather forecast the day before is favorable. Another spot, of course, would be Crater Lake National Park. And Crater Lake National Park gets a very healthy duration of over 4 minutes and 20 seconds of annular solar eclipse. And the way that an eclipse chaser looks at this map and thinks is the eclipse chaser is focused on the I-5 corridor because it can get it can get me up and down inside the path of totality fairly quickly if the area that I'm in is threatened by any clouds. So that's what these maps and what the field guide is good for is backup plans. I've seen 10 for 10 total solar eclipses, and on 3 occasions I had to take evasive action to find a backup location to view it successfully. Okay, here's another map that I just completed of the 4 corner states. Similar style to the other. The thing that's so remarkable about this area is the density of national parks and national park units in this 4 corners area. There are so many beautiful spots to go to. It'll be tough to make a choice. And this is another map from our atlas that shows the beginning half of the annular solar eclipse. And this is a page from our field guide. This is the commentary that the commentary that complements the maps in the field guide. I actually live in New Mexico. I live near Santa Fe, New Mexico. And my location for viewing the annular eclipse is going to be our local ski area, Ski Santa Fe. And the reason I chose that location, well, it's got a terrific panoramic view from on top, but the main reason I chose it is because it's right on the northern limit of annular solar eclipse. So what's interesting about being near the northern or southern limit? What's interesting is that there's a phenomena called Bailey's beads. And instead of it lasting just a few seconds, it'll last for half a minute or maybe longer. And so it'll just be an amazing view. What you give up in return for the extended progression of Bailey's beads is a shorter duration of annular eclipse, but in my judgment, it's worth it. Okay, here is the annular eclipse beginning at Oregon. And in this map here, in Nevada, Winnemucca is an interesting location. Winnemucca is interesting because it's pretty close to the longest duration of eclipse. It's got ample facilities. It has gas stations and hotels and restaurants. And it has 3 roads that you could take to relocate if there are any clouds. So that's what you think about is you look at the map and you look at what your mobility or options are. So Winnemucca would be a very interesting base location for the eclipse. Okay, now the eclipse is moving to southern Utah. Look at all these national parks. Great Basin National Park. There's Capitol Reef National Park. There's Bryce Canyon National Park, Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, Glen Canyon, Rainbow Bridge, Navajo National Monument, and more. So this is just a rich area for scenery and for annular eclipses. One of my favorite locations and altogether is Chaco Canyon. Chaco Canyon is actually, it's not even, it was marked on the previous map, but not on this one. Oh, it's out of this map, but that's a great destination for any kind of astronomical event. And then now the annular eclipse is leaving Texas, passing over all of San Antonio and Corpus Christi. Then the eclipse passes through South America. Now for the total solar eclipse, you can see how the eclipse touches Mexico right there at Mazatlan. It's around noontime when it reaches Mazatlan, and just makes its sinuous path across the US and Canada. Okay, so this is the intro map to the 2024 eclipse. You'll see that in the center part of the eclipse, there's dots with times. These are the local maximum times of eclipse. So when the eclipse crosses the border into the US, about 4 minutes and 26 seconds is the maximum. When it leaves the Canadian Maritimes, it drops down to about 3 minutes of eclipse. The thin lines that you see parallel to the eclipse path tell you how much dimming of sunshine there happens during the eclipse. This is called the obscuration. And the very closest line is 99% obscuration. Okay, so people love this kind of stuff. And it's a lot of fun, but we have these cards, save the date, and it's got a little map on the other side and a little message about the eclipse. And so people get these cards, send them to their friends, and it's a reminder of the eclipse coming. Okay, now this is something I've been working on a lot in the last couple of weeks. I'm in the process of processing Census 2020 data. And I have access to GIS software. GIS means Geographic Information System software. GIS is basically, you can think of it as smart mapping or mapping with a database behind it, because there's a lot of database concepts in the GIS. So anyway, I took the power of the GIS and I took the census data, and at the very finest level of census data, and the very finest level of census data is called the block level. And within cities and towns, this corresponds to city blocks. So a census block may have a few people or a couple of hundred people, but that's generally a block. In rural areas, blocks will be much larger and they'll span a number of farms or whatever is out there. So these are the numbers that I calculated from processing this precise census data. 31,625,000 people in the USA live inside the path of total solar eclipse. That's a large number. That's much larger than the number of people in 2017, which was about 12 million people. That's 2.5 times as much as the 2017 eclipse. And another interesting fact is the duration is nearly twice as long. Okay, but now look at these numbers too. Especially look at the number within 200 miles. 149 million people live within 200 miles of the path of eclipse. That's amazing. That's nearly half the country within 200 miles. Now, if you look at the eastern seaboard, look at New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, you can see the reason why. And the reason why is because the major cities of Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C. are just inside this 200-mile buffer to the path of eclipse. So these are the numbers for proximity and population counts within the eclipse. An overview of the 2024 eclipse from our Atlas of Solar Eclipses. For every eclipse from 2020 through 2044, we have a treatment like this with these small maps that show how high the sun is in the sky at the beginning, midpoint, and end of solar eclipse, as well as the times in UTC that the eclipse begins and ends. Just a note about time, and that is that in certain contexts, when I make an eclipse map or something like that, I have to use UTC because of the international nature of what I'm writing about, like maybe eclipses around the world. But if I'm making a map just for a certain country, then of course you would always adapt the local time zones for that country. But this one is from the Atlas, which is more international in appeal. So that's why I use UTC here. Okay, now one of the most important things people want to know is what time does it begin and how long will it be, where I am. So we compile these lists and people love these lists. And they can get the same information from looking at the map carefully. And we encourage people to do that, of course. I know some of you are intently looking at some of these numbers, and I am too right now. But these are part of the field guide. Okay, here's a map from the Atlas. And if you haven't noticed, the maps from the Atlas cover a broader area, a smaller map scale, because they don't cover the path at the same detail as the field guide does. So you can see that by the time the eclipse gets to Cleveland looks like it enjoys 3 minutes and 50 seconds of eclipse. That's pretty good. Niagara Falls will be a popular destination, although I don't know if the mist will interfere with the eclipse or not. Look at Montreal. Most of Montreal is inside the path. Toronto is close to the path, but a relatively short drive into the path. Here's a page from our field guide. So this is a commentary on this region. And Rochester is in the path. And earlier, it was mentioned that Rochester is the location of the next solar eclipse workshop conferences. Okay, now this is the beginning of the 2024 eclipse path. The eclipse reaches landfall in Mexico. There's a few islands off the coast of Mexico that the eclipse actually makes the very first landfall on. Mazatlan will be a very popular choice. Mazatlan is reasonably safe for visitors. However, the issue with Mazatlan is that while Mazatlan is pretty safe, if there's a marine layer at Mazatlan that morning of the eclipse, and you need to relocate, you have to be very careful and knowledgeable about where you can safely drive. So I'll just leave it at that. But there are some unsafe areas in the interior from Mazatlan. The very longest eclipse happens in Mexico, just over 4 minutes and 27 seconds. Okay, a nice string of cities inside the path of San Antonio, Austin, Round Rock, Killeen, Waco, Fort Worth, and Dallas is right next to it. When you look at a map like this, you look at the interstate system. For example, Interstate 10, that's up from San Antonio. That is something that an eclipse chaser takes careful note of and familiarizes themselves with the local freeway options, just in case you need to relocate. The weather statistic that was shown earlier showed that the chance of cloudy skies in Texas that morning or that early afternoon, I believe, is about 30%. So relocation may be necessary. Okay, here's a look at all of Dallas is inside that path. Dallas and Fort Worth together, that whole metropolitan area is about 7 million people. So just imagine 7 million people all of a sudden seeing totality. Hopefully it's clear for them on that day. But that will be an amazing event. So here the eclipse gets to the Great Lakes. Cleveland's right on a good location. As I mentioned earlier, when I was reading Jay Anderson's eclipsophile.com webpage, he discussed some interesting effects with edges of the lake that in some situation may be favorable on eclipse days. So I'm not an expert in that, but read his webpage very carefully, Eclipsophile, Phile. Okay, now the eclipse is engulfing most of Montreal and Lake Champlain. Burlington and Plattsburgh will be popular areas for the eclipse in Vermont and upstate New York. This is our print map of the path of totality. The information that you can see on this map is these curves that intersect the ovals inside the path. These curves denote the times of greatest eclipse at that time. Here's a resource that we make available to people, and that is that we did this last go around for 2017. We made a long map and just freely gave out the digital file. If you could find someone to print it, it's your print. Use it for educational purposes. We'd be thrilled if you do. So that's what this is. This is a 10-foot long eclipse map. It's got these little info boxes with just little nuggets of information about the eclipse or eclipse viewing tips or what have you. And for free. You can just go to the web page here and download it, and then take it to your local print shop. It'll cost something on the order of $70 to $100 to print this full size, which is 10 feet by 2 feet. And that's my presentation, and I would be happy to take any questions or comments.
So we encourage folks to please raise their hands in Zoom if you would like to ask a question, and we will call on you. So please go ahead and let us know what you'd like to ask. Not seeing any raised questions, raised hands at the moment. I do have to say that was a really good presentation. I do see in the chat that Diana Yoder is asking, how bad is traffic usually for eclipse chasers?
Okay, traffic, just going from personal experience and not from what you would expect. You may expect the traffic to be bad on eclipse morning, and then it trickles after the eclipse. It's actually the opposite. Traffic is usually okay on eclipse morning because people seem to spread themselves off on the approach, but after the eclipse, immediately after the eclipse, everyone hits their cars and starts driving home and instantly jams up the freeways. So I've witnessed that personally several times. The best advice is to simply, if you possibly can, camp another night, or stay in a hotel another night, or stay in someone's home another night. That's the best advice, because the traffic jams can be horrendous.
I totally agree with that. Well, having never seen an eclipse, I have lived in the traffic. June McDonald has her hand up. June, do you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question, please?
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. I just have a question. It's along the same lines of the busyness and the traffic jams. Is there some sort of way that someone from Canada, if they were traveling south somewhere in the States or into Mexico, is there some sort of information that can be obtained on like the best travel? I have never traveled that far down into the States, for example. So besides getting lost, it's the safety issue of getting caught up in all that traffic and where to go. Like when you said Mexico, there were parts that weren't as safe, and I'm thinking, oops. So I just kind of wondered how you could plan that kind of thing. What is the best way to plan a trip?
Well, you could find a tour guide, and they will make it very easy for you, and they take care of all of the logistics and the safety issues and so forth. That's one way. But then I guess the only other way to do it is somehow to get local information about what's safe to do, or where is safe to go and where is not safe to go. And you just need to get that local information.
Okay, thank you. Oops.
All right, so I see that Laurel Randau has her hand up. Please go ahead and ask your question.
I spent 20 years at Federal Highway Administration. If you go to Federal Highway website, I put it in the chat, most states, sadly not the states on the path of the eclipse, have real-time traveler information, but you can dial 511, similar to—
Laurel, we lost you. Laurel, I'm going to ask you to check your settings and try again. And we're going to ask Andy Frocknoy to come on and please ask his question.
All right, I just want to ask, first of all, thank you, Michael, for a terrific presentation. And you mentioned that you had this guidebook and atlas, and I just wanted you to say a little bit more about how people can get it.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, the way to get it is to go to the website greatamericaneclipse.com, and you'll find both the field guide and the atlas on the right side of the web page near the top. So that's the easiest and quickest way to get to them. Today, what we're doing is we have a batch of them that are signed by both authors, myself and Michael Bakich. So while supplies last, those will be available just at no extra cost. Thank you.
All right, Laurel seems to be back. Can you please try giving us
I was
your...
going. So there is
Thank you.
real-time traveler information, and I'm not so sure about the connections between Canada and the US. And I know Canada has good real-time traveler information as well. But you just need to, on your phone, punch in 511 and you'll get real-time traveler information. But you can, before you leave, it's always good before you leave to figure out your route. That website that's listed in the chat will get you to a map that you can click on the state and you can view cameras. So the information exists. It's brought down this, all this is from loop detectors in the roadway. It is firsthand information. It's not secondary information. It's not from Google. It's from your state DOTs. So it's the most reliable, most current information. And it will tell you what roads are not open, and red, yellow, green. That's what you need to know. If it's green, it's a good road. Everyone else is viewing the same maps at the same time, so plan accordingly.
Yeah. All right, are there any other questions or comments? I see Don Davies making the comment in the chat to carry extra fuel. While folks out in the Northeast won't need to worry about that as much, for folks out in the Southwest, that can be a very real concern. Do we have any additional questions or things that folks would like to bring up? Is there anything else you'd like to add, Michael, as we still have time left in this session?
Well, one thing with a group like this that's always fun is to put it out there where if people are willing to share their secret viewing location, if they could share their viewing location and the reasons why they picked that location, that would be fun.
Folks, go ahead, raise your hand if you have a story you would like to contribute, a secret spot you would like to share. I am missing living in Massachusetts, where there was always that friend who had a cabin on the lake. This is one of those times to go find that friend with the cabin on the lake. Oh, there's lots of stuff going in on the chat. Let me see. So Don Davies, you want to go ahead and unmute and...
So I definitely want to highlight that the Hill Country in Texas is going to be a phenomenal place to come, mainly because we also have bluebonnet season, the wildflower season, and we're going to be at the peak of bird migration. So as I tell folks, when you're traveling for these eclipses, you want to make sure that at least you're in a very interesting place with a lot of sights to see should things go south. So definitely, I think we're going to see a lot of people here in the Hill Country scattered throughout.
Yes, it's a beautiful part of the country. David, KV8LLL, you want to go ahead and unmute?
Yes, I was wanting to ask Michael if he had suggestions on what kinds of things people should carry with them.
For the eclipse, I think you should definitely have a field guide with you. I think the thing is, just use common sense and be as self-sufficient as possible. Besides the the regular things like food and water, I would personally always bring binoculars to an eclipse, and I would use them in a very specific way. If you have filters that fit securely on the front of the binoculars and you can use those, I always tape them down because you have to be paranoid about your vision. But with tape down filters on the binoculars, I can watch the partial phases or the Baily's beads during the annular eclipse. But the very best purpose to use solar binoculars is during totality, because that's the best view of all of you will be gobsmacked at the natural appearance in the sky that you see with your eyes. Telescope is tough because you have to point it and it's a very narrow field of view, but binoculars hit that sweet spot of giving you just the right magnification so you have a splendid view of the complex corona of the sun, and that view alone is just going to blow your mind. So bring binoculars, know how to use them. You can safely use them during totality, but absolutely put them away if there's any tiny bit of the sun visible.
And do you have any cautions? For instance, I've heard Rick many times point out, never use plastic lenses. Do you have any other additional, don't use this particular equipment pointers to give?
Yeah, well, there's some old-fashioned solar filters that should now be pretty well disappeared from the marketplace. They don't exist anymore, but the most basic common sense about filters is first have an approved filter, but second, put it in front of the optics, not behind the optics. Like don't put any filter in front of the eyepiece. That's not where it belongs. It belongs on the business end of the telescope. So you have to follow those common things, and you have to be paranoid that when you secure a filter to a telescope or to binoculars, it has to be absolutely secure, because you don't want that thing flying off when you're looking at the sun. That would be really, really bad. But just take those precautions and you will have an amazing view, especially with binoculars during totality.
That is excellent. So I see Adele Maury. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced your name. You can go ahead and unmute and give us your question.
Thank you. That is a great resource, that free download printable map that you showed. And I was just wondering if other graphics on your website are also open source and available to share with our audiences in different ways, social media, websites, etc.
Yes, people are free to use the content on the website for their outreach. The only caveats are if people use our content, we'd appreciate a credit. And if you're doing anything commercial with it, well, you got to talk to us about that. If you're writing a book, that's almost certainly okay. But pretty much our maps and content on the website can be freely used for sharing. It's a resource.
Awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, as a nonprofit, we appreciate that.
Oh, sure.
All right, Doug Duncan, you're up next.
Something I would recommend to everybody that I have found very useful at past eclipses is recording a countdown. For instance, if it's going to be 4.5 minutes, record something beforehand, and it maybe says every 10 or 15 seconds a countdown. You don't want to be trying to read your watch in the twilight of a total eclipse and wasting time. And I very much agree with Michael that my most amazing views have been through binoculars. But what I usually try and do is spend about half the time looking through the binoculars, then looking at the other things you can see in totality, like a circular sunrise all the way around you and looking for planets and whatnot. But it's kind of hard to remain calm and plan your time. And so I found myself rescued several times by a countdown that was telling me how much time was left. And also, if you're using binoculars, of course, you don't want to be looking with the binoculars once the totality ends. So I recommend to people having a little countdown, and you can use that during totality.
All right. MJ Percy, you're up next.
Hey, everybody. Along that line of what Doug was just saying, my second solar total eclipse, I went down to Chile in 2019, and the leader of our group had an app that gave us the countdown right down to the second. And I tell you, it was really, really valuable because I missed the transformation of the crescent sun to Bailey's beads to the diamond ring in the 2017 eclipse because I didn't know exactly when it was safe. But with that timer, we knew exactly when totality was going to begin. And I know you can't actually officially tell people to take their glasses off before totality, but you don't get to see those phenomena if you leave the glasses on until actual second contact. So yeah, that app is probably worth whatever it costs to get that exact timing for your location.
All right. I'm not seeing any more questions right now. Is there anything else you'd like to reflect on, Michael?
Well, it's 2 years until the big eclipse day. We have a lot of work to do together. I'm busy every single day, just developing new content and just building out the website, building new things. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I feel privileged to be able to do this. You know, I had a long career as a geographer and cartographer, and I've been an eclipse chaser. And so at a certain point, I just combined my professional skills with my personal interest. And so it's been a lot of fun doing that.
That's awesome. So I see Andy Frocknoy's hand is up again. Come on back, sir.
Thanks. I just want to, if we're done with this session, I wanted to remind people about what's coming up, but I'll if there are any other parts to this session, I don't want to get in the way.
So we do have about 13 minutes left before the break. If there are no questions, I mean, Michael, you have 13 minutes.
And you have to fill it.
You do not actually. Terry Richardson, I saved you by raising their hand. Terry, go ahead.
Well, I'll just talk a little bit about projects I'm working on. Is that okay?
Yeah, so we now suddenly have 3 questions. Now
okay. Well, then let's take the questions.
All right, so let's go to Terry Richardson first. Go ahead and unmute.
Well, mine is just a quick dumb thing. You should get my email address or phone number and find out where I'm going to be, because that's where you don't want to be. I've been called out on 5 eclipses, including driving all the way to Canada for one, where 200 miles in either direction, everyone saw totality, but a little tiny cloud covered the sun about 30 seconds before totality and left about 30 seconds afterwards. That was my comment.
So you're 0 for how many?
5.
0 for 5?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm just
the one that went over Charleston I saw a little bit, but we had pretty heavy haze and you didn't get the effect of totality. But it did kind of clear up almost. But I'm looking for going to maybe Texas for this one and hoping it'll be
Sounds good.
better.
So Dawn Davies has her hand up again. Go ahead and unmute and come on up.
I put a little bit of it in the chat, but I wanted to sort of highlight how important it is, I think, to find ways to record your experience. The 2017 eclipse for me was my first total solar eclipse, and I've been recording on a camera the group that I was observing with, and it was really beneficial because we were observing how we reacted. And the eclipse for us was so quick. I mean, it was half the time this 2024 is going to be. And afterwards, it was like, God, was that emotional enough? Like I really kind of expected, to have some kind of buildup of this sort of welling of emotion after it. And I kind of had forgotten because I was so involved with observing. When I went back and looked at the video, obviously I was gobsmacked. So, I think it's important to kind of record especially if you're going to be around other people, what everyone's reactions are and how you experienced it, because that's not something you're going to have an opportunity to look back on.
I agree with that 100%, that it's, like if, just with with an iPhone or an Android phone, the very best thing you can do is take a video of the group that you're with. Don't point it at the eclipse because it's going to be a tiny little dot that's out of focus, but point it at your group and that will be just rich.
Yes, that's an excellent idea. Mark Percy has their hand up. Come on up, Mark.
It's me again. I just changed my name to my actual name. To piggyback on what Dawn was saying, one of the things that I found people were really, really interested after the 2017 was a camera pointed at my group, but with time lapse, because you could actually see the shadow approaching as distant clouds would turn dark. And then you could see the end of the shadow approaching as those distant clouds lit up again. So, a video with time lapse is really dramatic to show people afterwards.
That is awesome. I'm not seeing any more questions. With 10 minutes remaining, I am going to do as Andy was recommending earlier. Up next, we are going to have the formal education session after a brief break. That will start at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, that's 11:30 a.m. Pacific. Those of you in the middle, you get to do math. That will be in the plenary Zoom session, which I will drop the link into the chat for those of you wishing to go to that. This is a jam-packed day, so do take advantage of what few breaks we have to go grab water, food, get all the protein you could possibly need. We're going to marathon our way through the sun today. All right, any last thoughts, Michael, that you would like to sell with? Wait, Matt
is fine.
Bobrowski. Yes.
Nice to see a lot of friends and colleagues here. Anyway, I've been asked a question, maybe this is a question for someone like Fred. We have very precise times for the eclipse in 2024, but how does that precision decrease as you try to predict farther out, a decade in the future, a century in the future, a millennium in the future? Does anybody have a graph that kind of shows the uncertainty or the precision of the time as a function of how far out you're trying to predict?
Yeah, what you're describing is called delta T, which is the variability in the rotation of the Earth about its axis, and it's intertwined with actually global warming because as glaciers and ice caps melts, that rearranges the distribution of mass around the Earth and very subtly changes the rotation of the Earth. So, the accuracy of eclipse predictions far in the future are definitely impacted by that. I don't recall exactly, but the uncertainty, I think a couple of millennia out is like an hour, and then it just gets worse much more quickly beyond that because of the unpredictable nature of the variability of the Earth's rotation.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, we have David is back with another question. Go ahead, David, and unmute.
Okay. How much weight do you put on the long range weather forecasts?
Well, it's, I would rather go to Texas than to New Hampshire as my base location. You always go to where you have accessible, good odds of weather. But I wouldn't discount going to say that the New England or the Midwest for the eclipse either, because I personally traveled to an eclipse where we only had a 10% chance of seeing totality, and we got lucky and we saw the whole thing and it was beautiful. And in other parts of Africa away from where we were, people who were supposed to be in dry locations got clouded out. So funky things can happen, but the way to think like an eclipse chaser is you select a base, and that base is in a good location relative to the highway system. And then you start studying the weather forecasts, and you develop a plan A, a plan B, a plan C. One of the most remarkable experiences I had was an eclipse in Australia, where a friend of mine organized eclipse viewing for about 100 of us. And we all paid him a small fee. And what he did with that fee was he took care of some logistics, but he did something brilliant. He hired a meteorologist, and this meteorologist made micro forecasts for 7 discrete locations that were eclipse viewing locations. And this was on the coast of the rainforest of Australia. So the coast was pretty cloudy, but the interior, one of the 7 locations was perfect. We went there, every single person in our party, over 100 people, saw the eclipse perfectly. The people who stayed on the beach, half of them saw it, half of them didn't. So that's just part of the thinking process you go through when you become an eclipse chaser and take it so seriously.
Okay, I'm at the other end of it. I live about 2 or 3 miles from the center line of the 2024 eclipse. So we're expecting our county to double or triple in population, but we're in Ohio. So we've only got, we got a 60% chance of clouds that day. But we have had some really nice April days here in the last few years. It's not so nice today, but we have had some nice sunny days. So we're hoping.
Well, whatever you plan for that day, like if you have a gathering with friends or family, if possible, keep some flexibility so that if you need to drive 100 miles that morning, if you have the flexibility to do so, you go from 60% clouds to 40% or something like that. You can stack the odds in your favor by staying mobile.
All right, we are coming to the end of this amazing session. Before we go, I'm going to ask you to one more time tell everyone where they can find more information on you and everything that you have planned for the upcoming eclipses.
Okay, well, obviously we have a website, greatamericaneclipse.com. We're also active on social media outlets. The big ones: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. So we have a lot of content that's flowing out through there. If anyone wants to reach me directly, they can email me at michael@greatamericaneclipse.com. So that's my secret email address.
Thank you so much. And just as a reminder, yes, these images can be used for nonprofit purposes, but please reach out. Up next, as I said before, we are going to take a quick 10-minute, let me see if I'm lying to you, a quick 15-minute break. Up next, there is going to be a plenary session. I lied, it's a 20-minute break. There's going to be a plenary session on formal education. The link for that is going into the chat right now. And if you miss anything, we are doing everything we can to make sure that all of this content is going to be going up on the Douglas Eclipse YouTube channel. So miss a session, you know where to find it. Later today, we are going to continue to have breakout sessions after the formal education session. And then of course, tonight is going to be Angela's amazing public talk. And there's a poster session in Gather Town in between. If you need any help, don't be afraid to reach out. We are here to make sure that you have not just a successful eclipse, but a successful conference. So thank you very much, and go forth, find fluids, find food, and then find more science. We'll see you all on the other side. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, Pamela.